Yes, good evening, everyone, and welcome back to the Football Tribe UG channel. Robert Kesakos is your usual suspect. Welcome back to yet another live broadcast on your favorite football updates channel. It's a pleasure to be back with you on this beautiful Monday night/evening or afternoon or morning, depending on wherever it is that you join us from across the world. We're about 30 minutes late, but accept my sincere apologies for that. For those of you that are regular on this channel, you know that keeping time is one of our most valuable assets. But every now and then, for reasons beyond my own control, I do come late. And for that, I thank for your indulgence. And it's largely oftentimes not because I'm late, but because of the space that I use to shoot. It has to be free of any distractions and anything in that regard for us to have a very successful conversation. So every now and then it's bound to be to cost me a bit of time. So it's basically that. But otherwise, I hope you've had a wonderful Monday. It's been a very, very hot day. And as I speak, it is the temperatures are still really, really high. As unfortunate as that sounds, I don't know if it's unfortunate anyway. But I think maybe it's a good thing. It depends on how you look at it. But it's uncomfortably hot in a way, at least more than what I'm accustomed to, or more than what I'm comfortable with. But it is what it is. We are nonetheless grateful for the gift of life, and we are back. This Monday evening, we'll be talking about Manchester City. We'll be talking about Liverpool. There's incredible news coming through from that side. And yeah, and everything in that line in as far as tonight is concerned. So you'll indulge me. Oh, Jesus Christ. I'm trying to have our audios tested just to make sure everything checks out for purposes of this particular broadcast. So you'll indulge me in a bit as we wait for the others to also join us, to join the queue. As we speak, there's a game in the Premier League that's ongoing. That's a game between Crystal Palace and West Ham. We know what West Ham's preference for result would be in a game of this stature, given that they are fighting against relegation, and Tottenham drew in the weekend, so they would want to put as much distance between themselves and Tottenham Hotspurs as soon as possible. But so far, it's not yet gone their way, nor has it gone against them, because as we speak, that game is still goalless. We'll also perhaps indulge ourselves in regards to what's to come in the course of the week. Tomorrow, we have a fixture between Chelsea and Brighton. Then also tomorrow we have games in the Spanish La Liga. Then also tomorrow we have that reverse fixture between Inter Milan and Como. We know that the first leg ended goalless in the Coppa del Rey. In Coppa Italia. Sorry about that. I just had the Coppa del Rey final just on my lips. So basically, it will be that. It will be that will form the basis of our conversation tonight. In as far as things go. By the way, I don't know whether it's because it's a home fixture, but Crystal Palace have put up quite the fight. I do not think, given the circumstances of last week, they would really, really, really be up for it. But I mean, there's a part of me that thought that after them qualifying for the semi-finals of the UEFA Conference League and all the partying that they had to go through, perhaps their performance tonight would be not dull, but would fall a bit short of West Ham's, pressure. But it's been a game of sort of few chances, not much clear-cut chances here and there. It's been a bit of a controlled game. I think Crystal Palace will be happy or are happy that it is still goalless. Really, West Ham on the other side would pretty much want or love for the scoreline to be much, much different. So it's that. Anyways, like I said, tonight we'll begin with Manchester City, and the conversation at Manchester City is one of the pending departure of Johnstones, because it's been confirmed that he will be leaving Manchester City, or it's being reported that he will be leaving Manchester City at the end of the season. So, I mean, of course, he joins a host of other Manchester City players that have left the previous summer, that will be leaving this summer, because already Bernardo Silva has penned his goodbyes to those Manchester City minors or players and things like that. So, and particularly, it's simply a continuation of this transition period for Pep Guardiola and this Manchester City side. They've got. I think they've gone about it pretty much the right way in terms of being very. It's not been a straight flip up. It's been gradual in a way, because this transition begins with the departures of the likes of Riyad Mahrez, Ilkay Gundogan when he first left for Barcelona, the likes of Gabriel Jesus, the likes of Alexander Zinchenko, Sergio Kun Aguero. So it's you've had that core City side be moved on bit by bit as they inject in new players. And we can perhaps have a wider discussion on whether pound for pound the replacements have been up to the beat or even better or otherwise. But you felt that it's been such in a first manner when you go back last summer, particularly with the exit of Kyle Walker, who had initially left the club in January and played for AC Milan on loan until the end of the season. You go back to, what's his name? You go back to, yes, you go back to some of those players. Kyle Walker, Ederson Morales, Stefan Ortega. Yes, he may have been a squad player, but he was a very good player for them. Then you've had players like Emile Laporte leave prior, then Manela Kanji left last summer to join Inter Milan, and things like that. So, hello, GFT. Good evening. So you've had this sort of phased sort of move out of some of these senior figures or senior players, and now you've seen the arrival of Kushanov, the likes of Mark Gay, to join the likes of Ruben Diaz, who I am sure not very long, he will equally be leaving, maybe in the next 1 or 2 years, most probably. You've seen the arrival of Nico Gonzalez, Tijan Reinders. Why? Because there is an expectation that at some point Rodri could leave. There's an expectation that Mateo Kovacic is going to be leaving the club at some point. So, you can look at it in that way. The likes of Raheem Sterling leaving, and you have the Omar Mamouche, of course, Jeremy Doku arriving at the club, Savinho. So regardless of what you think about the arrivals, you can see that Pep Guardiola has more or less handled this transition period really, really well. It's only last season that he ended up trophyless, but this season he's on pursuit of a domestic treble where he can win the Premier League title, the FA Cup, plus the Carabao Cup that he's already won. And those are there for the taking in as far as he's concerned. Those 2 other trophies are there for the taking, particularly with the FA Cup. They already in the semi-finals, and they'll be playing this weekend against Southampton at Wembley Stadium. And then the other semi-final, of course, involves Leeds United and Chelsea. And you bet your good money on it that Manchester City are the favorites to win the FA Cup. When you rank the teams that are left in there, in terms of that competition. So I think I'll put Manchester City, I'll put Chelsea, I'll put Leeds and Southampton, basically in that order, really. But of course, cup competitions are cup competitions. Anything can happen. Any team can be knocked out at any one point. And yeah, those kinds of things, are bound to happen or eventually happen at some point. And it is what it is. So then now, fast forward, you have this Johnstones. Crystal Palace thought they had broken the deadlock, I think probably through Ismail Sarr, but there's judged to have been a handball in the build-up to the goal. And Of course, it will be checked. Oh, yeah. The ball it does take a strike off Jean-Philippe Mateta's arm, and therefore it does not stand. So they'll try to contest it, but there's no way around about that. The rules are clear. If at any one moment in leading up to a goal, the ball touches the arm of the beneficiary team of the goal, then it's not going to stand. And basically, this time around, Jean-Philippe Mateta, unintendedly so, has been the culprit here. But I think West Ham will be really, really grateful that they have just survived the scare. You know, like I said, the last thing they would want is to go behind in this game. The last thing they would want is to go behind in this game. So really, anyways, they managed to keep it afloat. So Johnstones joined Manchester City, I think, back in 2016 from Everton. Therefore, that implies by the end of this season, he will have been at the club for what, 10 years? And I mean, again, this further speaks to what I was saying. Majority of these Manchester City players that have eventually left, I do not think there's many good players that have been pivotal to that Manchester City machine that have been there for less than 5 years. So, of course, you have those that have lived it longer because Johnstones arrives in 2016. You have the likes of Bernardo Silva who have been there for 9 years, having arrived in 2017. You had the likes of Ilkay Gundogan who played their part, I think, for what, more than 5 seasons, 6 or 7 thereabout. Then you have you've had the likes of KDB who left after a decade at the club as well. So really, I think that's why it's time to say that it's this machine is being oiled, it's being serviced in the form of a transition, and I think they've handled it really, really well. The likes of Kyle Walker by the time they leave. So during his career at Manchester City, he's made, but I think in the Premier League, he should be around. He's not the guy that scores much, but he's had 255 appearances, I think, according to the Premier League website. 11 goals and 2 assists. That's for Manchester City, and he's. I don't know what for majority of the people will define as his legacy, but I think they'll appreciate that he's been really a good defender. 2, however, I do not think he's had the opportunity to live to his full potential because of injuries. When you go back to the 2022-2023 season, when Manchester City win the treble, including the Premier League title and the UEFA Champions League, and I think the FA Cup, because they beat Manchester United in the finals of that one, he was one of those key players. And that season, he was predominantly, at least for the better part of the second part of the season, played as a central midfielder, So he's largely been a good servant, but I think and he's had a good career because, I mean, if you win the UEFA Champions League, you win the Premier League title as many times as he's won it, because he's been part of every Pep Guardiola's title-winning season, because he arrives as a Pep Guardiola quote-unquote signing among the first players that he did sign, So because he comes in 2016, and his first season is the 2016-2017 Premier League season, for which they end up trophyless. I think they finished third on the Premier League log. Chelsea end up as the eventual champions. Tottenham Hotspur, I think, came second, and things like that. So he was part of the initial signings by Pep Guardiola. And like I said, he's been a diligent servant. This season, because of injuries, he's only made 7 Premier League appearances, with 3 of them being him as a substitute. When you go back to their 2024, I think, Premier League title winning season, he does score, I think, was it against Arsenal? Oh, that was last season. I'm really, really trying not to mix the two things. But for those of you that remember that 2-2 draw, I think that one was last season, because Arsenal beats Man City at home, and then the reverse fixture had ended in a 2-2 draw. So when they leave it late in that one. But also, you go back to when Manchester City hammered Arsenal 4-1. He was a key part of that, in the 2023 title running season. So I think he, as an individual, he'll be perhaps live a fulfilled career in terms of what he's been able to win. I mean, he's won 6 Premier League titles thus far, a UEFA Champions League. He's played 2 UEFA Champions League finals, and then he's won a handful of FA Cups as well as 5 Carabao Cups. So that in itself puts him in the right books of history. But like I said, given his talent, I think he would have hoped, or he would have been much appreciated among some of the Premier League's best defenders had it not been for injuries. Because, like I said, you go back to that treble-winning season and you look on it and think to yourself, just imagine that out of the 10 seasons he spent at Manchester City, he had at least 6 or 7 of those kinds of performances or of those kinds of seasons. Maybe he would be looked at in a different sort of shade or glory altogether, in as far as his place in the history of Manchester City will be concerned, and in the Premier League as overall. So it's really, really an intriguing conversation to have. It depends on how you want to look at things for him. So yeah, basically, but I don't think Manchester City are going to be too concerned in his departure. Like I said, he's not played much this season, and they have the sufficient numbers within their ranks. When you look at Kushanov, Joško Vardiol will be returning from his injury. McKay, you still have a Ruben Diaz. That's 4 centre backs already. So things like that. For those of you that are just joining us, welcome back. Welcome to the Football Tribe UG channel. Robert Kesakos is my name. I do join you live from Kampala, Uganda, where it's 49 minutes past the hour of 11 p.m. Do me one absolute honor and like the broadcast, but also consider subscribing to the channel and help support our journey of growth. Football Tribe UG is a football channel. It's a sports channel. We get to talk about football, particularly or predominantly we talk about the Premier League, we talk about the UEFA Champions League, the Spanish La Liga, and among other footballing competitions, whatever they are. In that regard, but so really, and so that's how Johnstones will be looked at the end of his spell with Manchester City. I do not know where his career will land next, because I do not think a lot of teams are going to be too eager for his signature. Not because he's not good enough, but because you basically take a bet on him that he will stay fit. And I think for players like him, this is the point. I do not know if these contracts are still signed in football these days, but traditionally you had players be paid based on appearances. I think John O'Shea had a similar contract at Manchester United. It was based on appearances. So if you're going to sign a player like Johnstones, let's say as a free agent, of course there's money that you're going to pay him upfront as a free agent. But more importantly, I do not think, given the risk that you're taking again on him with his injury track record, it would benefit any team to have him, let's say, on 100 grand a week. Because I'm assuming that, let's say, if he leaves Man City, he ends up at a mid-table team. A return to Everton cannot be ruled out, but he ends up at a mid-table team. I do not think it will be a Tottenham Hotspur. Certainly do not think it will be an Aston Villa, but I'm thinking maybe Everton take a chance on him. When I look at the Premier League table, I'll be thinking a team like a Crystal Palace of some sort, a team like FC Bournemouth or a Brentford, a Brighton, those kinds of teams, a Fulham, that he could land his place among those teams. Now, like I said, it has little to do with his talent and everything to do with his injury proneness. That because he's often prone to injury, that's why you do not. That's why I, for one, do not think that a lot of clubs are going to be eager for his signature. Look at Dominic Calvert-Lewin in the summer when he leaves Everton. A lot of teams dragged their feet about his signature. And whereas leagues have benefited from him with his tally of 11 goals thus far this season, because it's been a good return on investment in a way. A part of why a lot of teams that would have needed a striker that time in the summer was because they knew his injury record, that he was oftentimes injured. And they're thinking it's not worth the risk. And the other prime example I can give you, look at what two potential transfers that have fallen through have looked like, particularly for strikers that AC Milan have targeted. Look at Jean-Philippe Mateta recently in January with his proposed move to AC Milan. It fell through because he has a knee issue, you know. Then you look at Victor Boniface, his proposed move from then at the time Bayer Leverkusen, I think, to AC Milan. It fell through because of a knee issue. So, in other words, players failing their medicals. When it is reported that a player has failed their medical, it's either he has a health condition or an injury issue that he's been playing with, or an issue that the club in their own assessment assessed to be huge risk. You remember, and I also remember this back in the days, I think around 2013, 2014, I used to be one of those that had recommended that at the time that Arsenal go and sign a player like Demba Ba from Newcastle at the time. And Arsenal did not sign him, but he ended up having a stint at Chelsea. And the reason as to why Arsene Wenger did not sign him was particularly because he had that knee issue that he was aware of. So those kinds of things, you know, happen in the game. So that's what I think or feel for this guy, for, you know, Johnstones in regards to where his future may lie, you know, going forward. So basically, that's it, you know. So anyways, moving on from Johnstones and that, let's go to another player that is making the news. According to Sky Sports German, and this is through their representative in Florian Plettenberg, he says that Liverpool are focusing on signing Yan Diomande as their preferred replacement for Mohamed Salah. Now, guys, again, for those of you that are regulars on this channel, you'll know for a fact that we did a full video about assessing the kind of options or in terms of players that we think that Liverpool should be looking to sign or considering to sign as replacements for Mohamed Salah. Meanwhile, the game between Crystal Palace and West Ham has just finished goalless. West Ham will unfortunately have to settle for a point in this one, even though I think they would have loved to take more than just a point out of this game, because the implications of that point on the Premier League table is that after 33 games played, they are at 33 points, and that's only 2 points above Tottenham Hotspur. They would have wanted to win this game because had they won it, it would have taken them to 35 points. So, you know, there's that. Anyways, digressing back to what I was discussing or highlighting. For those of you that are interested, go back to the channel and look for a video where we talk about players that Liverpool can sign to replace Mohamed Salah. And as that was after he had announced that he will be leaving the club at the end of the season. So I'm really trying to see what the headline is for that particular video so that I make the right recommendation. Let me see. Okay, no. All right, no, that's not it. Oh, Jesus Christ. Has it been that long that we did that video? I certainly don't want to think so. Yes. The title to that video is 6 players that Liverpool can look onto to replace Mohamed Salah. And in that particular video, among the names that we highlighted upon was Yan Diomande. But of course, in addition, and I said this particularly at the time of doing that video, that wishfully so, that they could consider Bukayo Saka from Arsenal, they could consider Lamine Yamal from Barcelona. I remember Pedri did not appreciate it that I even mentioned Lamine Yamal in the conversation. We talked about players like Bradley Barcola. We talked about players like because I remember ignoring Gerard Bowen because I mean he's 29 years of age, but I'm equally trying to refresh my mind. Who yes, we talked about Magnus Aklecho from Monaco. He was one of those players. So really, and when you look around the Premier League, elite wingers and right-sided wingers or the inverted wingers that play on the right that are left-footed, and not very many that are really good. Yes, we talked about Michael Olise. In fact, Michael Olise was number one on that list. So for those of you that can't remember, and then of course we added on Yan Diomande. And the reason I remember, really, despite suggesting him, I had my reservations about Yan Diomande, and my argument was simple that he's yet to prove himself at this high level, at this elite level, because it's not too far back that RB Leipzig, it was actually only last summer that RB Leipzig signed him from Leganés. And yes, he's had a very, very brilliant season thus far with this RB Leipzig side. But if you're looking to replace Mohamed Salah, I think you'd want to have more or less a proven player than just a new kid on the block. Because all signings are risks, but some risks are bigger than others. That's how I put it. So I think, or at least I would want to think that, oh, Jesus Christ. Oh, I think I did not find the right document that I was interesting myself in. So, all right. So for me, and I remember putting them in particular order. Michael Olise, why? He's the best. He's one of the best there is. And the reason, because Bukayo Saka and Lamine Yamal were honorable mentions of that video, acknowledging the fact that it would be almost close to impossible for Arsenal to let go of Bukayo Saka, just as much as it would be close to impossible for Barcelona to let go of Lamine Yamal. So in our realistic assessment, that even though it would prove to be expensive, Michael Olise is the number one candidate. Then Bradley Barcola came in number 2. Yan Diomande was number 3. Number 4 was Magnus Aklecho. And, in that sort of ranking, So, guys, for those of you that have just joined us, welcome to the Football Tribe UG channel. Do me an absolute favor and like the podcast, but also consider subscribing to the channel if it is your first time here, and help this channel grow. So, at the time, I said, we're talking about a 19-year-old Ivory Coast winger, and as good as he is highly written about, because in 29 Bundesliga appearances, he has 12 goals and 5 assists. Those are the kinds of numbers that are really, really promising, and that you sort of look on to bank on and say, maybe there's something in there. But forget not that you can, quote unquote, get it wrong. 2, I think we ought to acknowledge that it's really, really difficult to fill the shoes of Mohamed Salah. It's going to be difficult, both for Liverpool and for whichever player that Liverpool sign. First of all, even if you are as talented as Lamine Yamal, even if you are as good as Michael Olise, even if you're as good as Bukayo Saka, even if you're as good as any other winger there is out there, because of the longevity and consistency that he's given Liverpool, it's not a given that even an elite talent walks into that Liverpool side and suddenly he sort of fills those shoes. I'm trying to read your name. Baka says, hello, bro, for Chelsea, how much they have to pay for Oshimen? Particularly at the moment, I do not know, but it could be anywhere north of 65 million pounds a plus. So I think that could be the ballpark figure that they could be looking at, even though it's not going to be a given. It's not going to be, it wouldn't be as simple as said, because he's not had a very brilliant season. That's why this season. But anyways, so to digress back, because Mo Salah, this is his 9th season at Liverpool, and 8 out of 9 seasons he's been elite, and it's only this season that he's had sort of his form drop, that he's not lived to the billing in as far as the season is concerned. But you can't just write him off. So because 8 out of 9 seasons he's been hacking it and been the best player there is, not just at Liverpool, but also in the Premier League entirely, whichever player walks in to fill that void, there's going to be huge expectations on him, huge expectations on them. And bearing it in mind that you've come in to fill the shoes of Mohamed Salah is the kind of state or where you think to yourself, is it even achievable? Of course, you have to try your best. You have to have the self-confidence in you and self-belief that you can actually do it. But in the grand scheme of things, it's not as simple as said. It's easier said than done, So for Yan Diomande, being 19 years of age, I think you have to look onto it and think to yourself, one, because basically you could call him a one-season wonder. At the moment, he's a wonder because you wonder whether he can replicate that sort of form. How many players have we seen fail to replicate those kinds of forms? Look at Bukayo Saka at Arsenal. As glowingly as he's often written about, look at this season. Where is he? He's been less impactful. Not because he's not shown he's capable of the consistency, but it's to show that you cannot even compare him to Mohamed Salah. Salah is just that, next level kind of thing. So for Yan Diomande to come in and trust me, first of all, he won't come cheap, at least according to multiple reports. So Sky German say Yan Diomande is now Liverpool's top target to replace Mohamed Salah, with the move approved by LFC decision makers, Liverpool decision makers. Concrete talks are ongoing with new representatives at Rock Nation Sports. Rock Nation Sports, isn't that the one of Jay-Z? Although no agreement has been reached yet, and other clubs have not entered negotiations. RB Leipzig are keen to adjust his salary and extend his contract. PSG, led by Luis Campos, are also in the race and have already held a meeting with his agents. Now, I'm thinking to myself, PSG, why I understand young talents, young brilliant talent is bound to attract attention. But PSG, why would you want to sign Yan Diomande when you have Kivicha Kvaratskhelia, Bradley Barcola, Desile Doué, Ousmane Dembele, you have the likes of Ibrahim Mbaye and Sene Mayuru, all who are not playing as much simply because you have top talent, But maybe they are looking at it in a different perspective. Maybe there's an expectation that one of their elite talents leaves because the likes of Bradley Barcola have been linked with potential moves away, with the likes of Arsenal and Liverpool interested in the same player. Kivicha Kvaratskhelia in recent weeks has been subject to speculation, linking him with the potential move to Arsenal and as the primary candidates that are interested in his services, as well as Liverpool eventually. So maybe that's what they're looking at it, that maybe we can cash in on one of these schemes and then have them replaced by Yan Diomande. Maybe. But that's how highly he's sought after. Usually when a talent comes out and you hear all big clubs coming for their signature, that means that the respective scouts of those clubs or technical directors or sporting directors have had a fine-tooth comb going through the player's abilities and their potential and how he fits in their respective club systems to be convinced, at least to a certain level, perhaps maybe not beyond reasonable doubt, but at least to a certain extent, that that player is the right player for them, or is a potential target for them. So, hi Adash, how are you doing? So that's the story for Liverpool. They are interested in Yan Diomande. He is electric. I remember he's not the kind of player that I've watched in week in, week out. But I remember when RB Leipzig shared the spoils with Borussia Dortmund this season in a 2-all tour. I remember watching him and he was quite electric. He's that kind of player, you know. He's quite very electric. And usually modern day wingers are not defined by just the things they do on and off the ball, but they are largely defined by their statistics, you know, because no matter how good you look, if you do not have the numbers in the form of goals and assists, you're going to be described as a busybody. Or like, for lack of a better word or phrase, we often call them idle busy, that they spend a lot of time looking busy but having no output. I think it's a criticism that I've leveled against Arsenal's Noni Madueke, that you spend a lot of time appearing to be busy, doing the kinds of things that you'd love to see a winger do. But that finishing touch, that final pass, that through ball that it gives you is often far lacking. And because it's lacking, he does not have the numbers on his sides. Not in the form of assists, not in the form of goals. There's this expectation that is going to improve. Look at Anthony Gordon. Anthony Gordon is a player that perhaps I do not appreciate it well enough, because for one, I think, yeah, he's a good player, but he's not an exceptional talent. This season, he quote unquote, he has numbers to his side. But when you dig into those very numbers, you could sort of bring them to question. For example, at the time of exiting the UEFA Champions League for Newcastle, he had, I think, he had scored 10 goals in the UEFA Champions League. But majority of those goals had come against Karabakh in the playoff round, you know. So, and I was thinking to myself, really, if we are going to look at if we are going to assess you that you've had a brilliant season thus far, shouldn't your contributions be more? You know, we're talking about a player that is 25 years of age. He should be in his prime, and maybe this is the season that he's hitting his prime. But in 176 appearances for Newcastle in the Premier League, he has 31 goals and 20 assists. That's a 51 goal involvement. That's less than 50% of the games he's been involved in. Actually, possibly less than 40%. So, and maybe he needs a different environment to show more of his capabilities. I am not convinced that Arsenal is the place where he is capable of showing that. Maybe Liverpool have a different, because Liverpool have been known to rely on wingers, predominantly. Whether it's been Sadio Mane or Mohamed Salah, and of course, a good part of that being Mohamed Salah, particularly during the Jurgen Klopp era. You go back to Raheem Sterling before he leaves the club to join Manchester City, that sort of thing. And yet, in contrast, on the other side, Arsenal have never been overly reliant on their wingers. They've had good wingers, but they've never gave you the feeling that wingers are the make it or break it for the Arsenal. So you sort of have that. So for me, I do not really rate Anthony Gordon that much. He's a good player, but good for the likes of Newcastle, good for the likes of Everton, perhaps Tottenham Hotspurs. But because, you see, crossing that level from, let's say, a mid-table team to the elite teams has often not been easy for some of these players. Players like Sadio Mane have been able to hack it. Players like Mohamed Salah have been able to hack it. But let's be fair. Salah goes from FC Barcelona to Chelsea, and then he goes to AC Roma. You can see that the drop-off is not that big in terms of leaving Chelsea to go to AC Roma. But how many players have you seen fail to hack it? Calvin Phillips at Manchester City, Jack Grealish from Aston Villa to Manchester City. When you look at Matthew Debuchy from Newcastle to Arsenal, of course, he was partly done by injuries. I'm trying to think of those players that have been signed for mid-table teams and arrived at big teams and failed to hack it. I remember Darren Bent leaving, was it Charlton to Sunderland, and then he went to Tottenham and things failed. No, actually, he joined Tottenham, things failed, he went to Sunderland, things worked, and he went to Aston Villa. So that bit of transitioning is not always simple, for players to sort of rise to the occasion. You must be a brilliant player for you to make that step up when you go to those levels. Africa will never unite, says Osimhen is too expensive for top leagues. I do not think that, okay, I'd want to agree with you in part on that, particularly because of his wage demands. He's been apparently reported to be walking around having these exorbitant wage demands. It's not because clubs cannot afford his transfer fees, but those wage demands have been quite significant. Then Osimhen should just go to Saudi Arabia. If it's about the money and you want to continue with your football, at the same time, shoot two birds with one stone, Saudi Arabia is the destination for you. If you want good money, but not as good as of Saudi Arabia, with football's eyes predominantly or constantly on you, then you stay within Europe's major top 5 leagues. So that's where and remember, Napoli have in his contract that he can, within 2 years after his transfer, he cannot, before 2 years elapse, he cannot join any elite Italian teams. He cannot go to a Juventus. He cannot go to an Inter Milan. He cannot go to an AC Milan. I do not think, when I look around the Spanish La Liga, and I know Barcelona have been mentioned in conversations involving Victor Osimhen, but I've always made the argument that he does not come off as the sort of Barcelona profile kind of player. 2, maybe one of the big teams he would suit maybe in the Spanish La Liga would be Atletico de Madrid. Then when it comes to the Premier League, he can suit any team, any of the big teams. He can suit them. So, but his wage demands have been reported to be quite exorbitant. Maybe he still has a lot to build back in his home country, Nigeria. And I do not blame him for having those significant wage demands. And maybe he believes that's his worth. Maybe he looks around and thinks to himself, look at what these guys are earning. Look at what Kai Havertz is earning, 280 grand a week, and what's he delivering, So then Chelsea, Adash says Chelsea is having a nightmare. They are not performing as a team. What's your thought on Chelsea and how to improve their performances? Any suggestion? So thank you so much, Adash. This is a very good question, but also a very difficult question to attempt. First of all, Chelsea are suffering the effects of change, are suffering from the effects of undesirable change and poorly timed change. Change can be undesirable but timely, but it can also be both undesirable and untimely. So, and I remember saying this about Chelsea and this was before they decided to part ways with Enzo Maresca. First of all, I did not feel that Enzo Maresca's relationship with his bosses was broken beyond repair. 2, I did not think, I was not convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that sacking Enzo Maresca or parting ways with Enzo Maresca was the solution to Chelsea's problems. I did not think that Enzo Maresca was the problem at Chelsea. I do not mean to say he was perfect. Sometimes he made questionable decisions, but he was a good guy and he was suitable for their project. First of all, it's a project of very many young players, and young players come with limited experience or lack of experience. I'll give you an example. You cannot tell me that William Estaval is an experienced player. No, he's not. You cannot tell me that Garnacho is an experienced player. No, he does not have the experience. Joao Pedro has not yet entered that bucket where I would say, yeah, he's such an experienced forward. No, he's not yet. Liam Delap is not an experienced striker. Jamie Gittens is not an experienced player. Pedro Neto is an experienced player, but not good enough or not consistent enough. Tosin Aderabio is an experienced player, but not good enough for Chelsea's caliber. Joshua Achepong is not an experienced player. Jorel Hato, not experienced enough. Marco Correa is both a good player and an experienced player. Richie James is both a good player and an experienced player, but one troubled by injuries. So, you look at their midfield. Dario Sugo, not an experienced player in my opinion. Romeo Lavia, a very good player, not experienced enough, troubled by injuries. Moises Caicedo is an experienced player. Enzo Fernandez is an experienced player. Cole Palmer is an experienced player having a bad spell. And the reason as to why I say Cole Palmer is experienced, first of all, he comes through the good ranks of Manchester City. And for 2 seasons, he carries Chelsea on his shoulders. So it's not like he doesn't know what to do. He's just not had a good season. So you go back to the situation of Enzo Maresca. In that Chelsea squad, Enzo Maresca had his soldiers, players that would run into a brick wall for him. He had those kinds of players. But then you also had players maybe who did not like him as much. Now, you make a swap out, and like I said, it was a poorly timed change. And Marco Correa said just as much that he understands the club wanting to change. But why could it not wait until the end of the season for them to make that change? You see? And that's a senior player in the squad making that assessment. You have Enzo Fernandez, your vice captain, questioning the decision as well. So you can see that some of the experienced players were questioning that decision. Others may have not come out publicly, but I'm sure there's quite a number of them that were thinking to themselves, what's just happened with the club? So, and then Marco Correa comes out also to say, young players are good, but you need experienced players in the squad. After the 2023-2024 season, Chelsea finishing 6th on the Premier League table, which I thought, in my humble opinion, they had done really well under the charges of Mauricio Pochettino. I thought they had done well in terms of the way he had handled the project. Now, they go into the summer or summer plans, and apparently among his demands were he wanted to sign experienced players to that Chelsea team. Egbali and Tony Boli and their minders did not see eye to eye with him, so they part ways with him. Fast forward, they bring Enzo Maresca, inexperienced, beyond being part of Pep Guardiola's coaching team and guiding Leicester City to a promotion, to a Premier League promotion with 1 season. But he does well in his debut campaign. He guides Chelsea to a top four finish, which is qualification to the UEFA Champions League. He goes on, expectedly so, to win the UEFA Conference League, and then he guides the club to the triumph of the FIFA Club World Cup in the summer. Brilliant. Now, those two trophies, in my humble opinion, were valuable capital in terms of buying yourself time for Enzo Maresca, that the club would take a bet on him regardless of what would transpire the subsequent season. They would trust that he knows what he's doing. But then also, we've had through the cracks, whispers through those small spaces within the air spaces of Chelsea's air conditioning system, that managers have been asked to play certain players so that the club can benefit from them when the transfer period comes. I'll give you an example, or I'll give you an assessment of this. You have, let's say, a player like Garnacho. If the club wants to sell him after buying him for £40 million, if the club is to sell him for £40 million or more, he must be on the pitch for the supposed suitors of the same player to say, yeah, we've been watching him play and he looks promising or he's good. But if that player is not playing, that means his value goes down. Case in point, still with Chelsea. Chelsea may have bought Mukalo Mudryk for an initial £61 million plus an expected £25 million in add-ons. Present day, do you think Mukalo Mudryk is worth £61 million? Why? Because he last kicked a game of football in Chelsea colours in November 2024. Ever since then, he's been on an indefinite suspension pending his case of violating anti-doping rules. So if he came back to, if let's say he was cleared to play football again today, when we get to the summer, his value is not going to be even 50% of the total package that Chelsea agreed to buy him. Therefore, Chelsea would be better off sending him out on loan to a club that is equally not going to pay high loan fees, but perhaps could agree to pay his wages so that with guarantees, with certain guarantees, that that club accommodates Mukalo Mudryk as much playing time as possible to up his value. Case in point, this time round away from Chelsea, Arsenal sent Ethan Nwaneri away on loan to Olympique Marseille. And Olympique Marseille were reported to have to pay a 1.5 million euro, I think 1.5 million euros in loan fees, rising to possibly 4 million euros, depending on appearances. Meaning, the less he plays, the higher the loan fee that Arsenal would receive. In other words, therefore, it would work in the best interest of Olympique Marseille to play him in more games that they end up paying a lower loan fee. But why would Arsenal negotiate a contract of that nature? To guarantee that this player that they've sent out on loan plays a good number of games, his potential suitors will be able to watch him. And when it comes to the summer and Arsenal think they want to sell him, they'll be able to say, look at his performances with Olympique Marseille. Look at some of his numbers. You value him at £25 million, we value him at £40 million, plus £5 million in expected add-ons. Therefore, our conclusion is that he's worth a 45 or to a £50 million player, as opposed to him rotting on the Arsenal bench, having only a handful of appearances in cup competitions, and then a club will be thinking, maybe because he's homegrown, because of his age, he's only worth £25 million. Or 20 plus 5 in expected add-ons, and maybe we'll give you a future 10% sell-on clause, and things like that. So there have been those murmurings out of Chelsea that for some of those players, the managers are being encouraged to play them so that when the transfer window comes, because remember Chelsea's strategy was sort of in such a manner that they want to bring up as many young players as possible. For lack of a better word, flip some for profit. When I use that analogy, let me use the example of a car. I'll give you an example. I don't know what currency you're accustomed to, Adash, but let's say you buy a fairly old car at $2,000. Then, when you get that car, you invest an extra $500 in it in terms of panel beating it. And then you put it back on the market for $3,000 or for $3,200. You know? So, in other words, you've taken a bet on it. So Chelsea have the model where they sign young players, they want to play them, and those that are not good enough to stay at Chelsea are let go while the club makes a bit of a profit off of them. But in that process, while sieving out the players that are good enough to be at Chelsea. That's how Noni Madueke ends up at Arsenal. Chelsea make a profit. He only joined them, was it in January 2023 from PSV Eindhoven? So there's that bit of mentality at Chelsea. So I think it's a number of factors. Now, in some cases, injuries have not helped in the grand scheme of things. But also the change of tactics mid-season is bound to impact players in one way or the other, because the adaptation to those new tactics may not come easy. And you remember Liam Senior saying in early days that he had to desist himself from changing too much in terms of how the team went about its game overall to stay within the blueprint of Enzo Maresca and only tweaking a few things here and there. You know, so there's quite a number of factors. And as you say, no pain, no gain. And I wanted to see someone from the team accept defeat and stand tall for the upcoming matches. Now, I've always argued, because of a lack of leadership, because of a lack of experienced players, you do lack leadership in some of those playing departments. I am one who believes that Chelsea play much better when they have Rachel James on the pitch because of what he brings in the form of leadership on that pitch. Now, when you have, let's say, Moises Caicedo playing alongside Romeo Lavia and Andre Santos, yes, Moises Caicedo may wear the armband, but you feel that leadership could be a bit lacking. When you go to their forward lines, where you would have Garnacho from one side, or Willian Esteval and Pedro Neto and Joao Pedro or Liam Delap, who is providing the leadership in those lines? Who is going to remind the player, that a winger, that this is how I want you to give me the ball? And because of their experience, because of their leadership qualities, that winger is going to listen to that player. So you have all that. Then, the other thing that we cannot rule out is that some players at Chelsea are good, but not good enough. I've had multiple conversations with Chelsea fans in regards to where they think their club should be in terms of competing and, you know, being at the very most elite level. And I told them that part of their problem is that they compare their greatest ever Chelsea sides to their current Chelsea side and try to reconcile the two, and the two do not match up. They are stuck with those glory days where you had the elite team of Frank Lampard, Joe Cole, Solomon Kalou, Didier Drogba, Florent Maruda, Michael Barak, Fernando Torres, you know, John Terry, Tim Cahill, Cannavaro Pryor, you know, Ashley Cole, Pet Cech, all those kinds of players. And then fast forward, you also look at The Chelsea that won the Premier League title in 2017. Victor Moses, Marcos Alonso, John Terry was still there, Tim Cahill was still there. You had Thibaut Courtois, you had Diego Costa, you had Eden Hazard, those kinds of players. Again, reflect on the Chelsea that you have today and draw comparisons. Go back to Chelsea's Champions League winning side in 2021. Edouard Mendy, the goalkeeper. Whereas Kai Havertz scored the winning goal, has a significant season for Jorginho. He's one of their best players, So when you do the dives through in, you will see that there is a stark difference between the quality that they have today and the quality they have previously. And also, in comparison, the experience or lack of. So it's not as easy as Chelsea fans would want it to be. So, but they've acknowledged that this time around, they'll be going in the market to look for ready players, players that have a bit of experience. Because a player can be both young and experienced. I'll give you an example. A player can be only 23 years of age, but have been playing at the top level for the last 4 or 5 seasons. In other words, from the age of 18. A player can also be 27 and inexperienced. Why? Because they've not played as many games, despite being 27. So both words can be true. Game is way behind these days. Money is killing games, pride and honor above all. I don't know if, okay, that's a bit subjective when it comes to money. You could say money is a motivating factor. You could say money is killing the game. You could say, I don't know. All I know is that money may help you to success, but it's not finite. It's not ultimate. Sometimes you have to do it the hard way. Look at how much money PSG spent on trying to win the UEFA Champions League in bringing in all those elite stars, and it did not work out. Eventually, it's been the Desiree Doués that have delivered it. The Bradley Barcolas, the Ousmane Dembele, who they signed for only 50 million euros in 2023 from Barcelona. The Willian Pachos of this world, the Achraf Hakimis, the Nuno Mendes of this world, the Fabian Ruiz of this world. Songwe Chalwe is one of the best coaches in recent times, but they are underrated. So, but also Chelsea need to stick to a manager for some time. Managers need time to build projects because this is a Chelsea project, but it's one that has sliced its way through managers like a hot knife in butter. You part ways with Thomas Tuchel for I do not know what clear reasons. You part ways with Graham Potter, Mauricio Pochettino, Enzo Maresca, and now you have a new guy. In between there, you've had an interim in Frank Lampard. So, if you're that group of players, and every season or a season and a half, you have a manager coming in with new tactics and a new style, it's bound to become difficult. Anyways, it's a very lengthy conversation or big debate about Chelsea. But first of all, they have made their bet. They should lay in it in terms of sticking with Liam Rafinha and give him time and see if things will work out. One of the advantages of a manager coming in half season is that you get the benefit of having a snapshot of dicing through the squad that you have and assessing which players are fit for purpose and those that are not. And then when the summer comes, you know what needs to be done. You know those that you recommend for the club to part ways with and those you think that should be coming in. But we'll have to wait and see. Anyways, it's been a pleasure doing this with you guys. Allow me part ways. Dash, thank you so much. Africa will never unite. Ultras, Baka and GFT, thank you so much for having been part of tonight's broadcast. Allow me wish you a blessed night, and we'll do this again tomorrow morning as we look forward to Chelsea's game, because we'll be doing the preview in the morning for that Chelsea game against Brighton and the games that will be coming on Wednesday as well, in as far as the Premier League is concerned. Stay blessed, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye for now.